Good evening, visitors, and welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Josie Dunham, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Major Jason Eltham. We warmly welcome the family of Captain Thomas Ivanhoe Eltham, whose story will be told shortly. We welcome members of the Skyville Officers Training Unit, graduating class of 1967, including the family of Second Lieutenant David Patterson. We also welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Club Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During the ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family, visitors and students from the following schools. From Queensland, St Augustine's Primary School, St Joseph's School, Chinchilla and Mount Isa School. Please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Boys and girls, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's first World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land that they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Captain Thomas Ivanhoe Eltham. Known to his friends and family as Ivan, Thomas Eltham was born in 1909, the eldest of 3 children of Edmund and May Eltham of the Melbourne suburb of Caulfield in Victoria. A highly skilled and experienced soldier, Eltham had an extensive military career that began in 1927 when he enlisted in the militia as a gunner with the 10th Field Brigade, Royal Australian Artillery, at Albert Park. Over the next 6 years, he rose through the ranks to lieutenant before resigning to find employment in civilian life. In 1935, he announced his engagement to Ruth Mitke, and the couple married the following year. In time, they produced 2 sons, Peter in 1943 and Tim in 1945. Eltham enlisted in the Permanent Forces in March 1939. With his skills and experience in the civilian forces, he was attached to the Australian Instructional Corps, and on the outbreak of war was posted to the Officer Training Wing at the Royal Military College at Duntroon. After coastal defence duties at Port Kembla, Eltham spent time as an instructor at the Infantry Officer Training School at Bonagilla in Victoria, before a posting to the Guerrilla Warfare School at Wilson's Promontory. There, after the outbreak of the Pacific War, he was involved in the training company-sized units to act independently of higher command behind enemy lines, carrying out tasks that included raiding, sabotage, and subversion. In August 1942, Eltham volunteered and was accepted for service in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force. Made lieutenant, he was posted to the newly raised 2nd 7th Independent Company, which carried out operations against the Japanese in the Southwest Pacific. The 2nd 7th Independent Company deployed to New Guinea in late 1942 and was used to reinforce elements of the 6th Division and Kanga Force at Wau during the Salamoa-Lae campaign. Engaged in aggressive jungle patrolling and laying ambushes against the Japanese throughout January and April 1942, the unit took part in the defence of Wau before advancing to Mabo, where it conducted a series of raids. Eltham was sent back to Australia for several months, suffering a knee injury, but returned to New Guinea in July and rejoined the 2nd 7th Independent Company in its defence of the airfield at Benabena. As a platoon commander, Eltham led patrols in the Ramu Valley to observe the main approaches to Benabena airfield. As a platoon commander, Eltham led patrols in the Ramu Valley to observe the main approaches to the Benabena airfield. He was involved in preparations for the offensive around Lae, patrolling along the Wharia, Logie and Avapia rivers throughout November before the company returned to Australia. For gallant and distinguished service in New Guinea, Eltham was mentioned in dispatches. Eltham had proven himself a capable officer, highly skilled in jungle warfare. In August 1944, he was seconded for duty to Z Special Unit, an administrative unit for Australian Army personnel serving with the Services Reconnaissance Department, the code name for Special Operations Australia. The SRD was a specialist reconnaissance and sabotage unit that involved British, Dutch, New Zealand, Timorese and Indonesian operatives. It conducted clandestine operations against the Japanese in places such as Borneo and the islands of the former Netherlands East Indies. Since operatives were usually inserted by parachute or by submarine, Eltham was trained and qualified as a parachutist before departing for service with the SRD. Throughout April and May 1945, Eltham was involved in a covert operation known as Aegis in northwest Borneo, forming part of wider planning for the eventual reoccupation of British North Borneo. Z's Special Unit sought to establish an intelligence party near Labak Bay and trained guerrillas while staging attacks on the Japanese. On the 21st of May 1945, Eltham was among the crew and passengers of a B-24 Liberator bomber of number 200 flight, Royal Australian Air Force. That failed to return to Darwin following an operational sortie in support of SRD. The aircraft had been flying low to drop supplies to Z's Special Unit operatives near the village of Mellabong when it stalled and clipped a tree, crashing and killing all 11 personnel on board. Aged 36 at the time of his death, Eltham was buried near Mellabong village and now rests in Labuan War Cemetery in Sabah, Malaysia. A small epitaph from his grieving family appears on his headstone. He gave his life. Thomas Eltham is listed on the honour roll on my left among 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Captain Thomas Ivanhoe Eltham, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall not grow old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. Lest we forget.
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man, lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub of Gallipoli, with his poor tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial, and we wish you all a very good evening.